On the fridge, great in the offseason. We're starting with the NFC East, where every team swears they nailed the draft and won free agency, but who really aced it and who's heading to summer school? Time now to bring in our resident professors of pigskin. We got John Breach and Mike Renner here to hand out some off-season grades. Gentlemen, I hope you got your red pens ready, right? Because the NFC East is just begging for some feedback here. Let's start with the Cowboys. They entered the 2025 season with Brian Schottenheimer taking over as head coach after Mike McCarthy's exit. They added George Pickens, Javonte Williams, and a first-round guard in Tyler Booker to offset some losses that they had there. Zach Martin, DeMarcus Lawrence, and Brandon Cooks. But fellas, with Dak Prescott returning from injury and just a historically brutal late season schedule ahead, how would you grade their offseason? Breach, I'll start with you.
Well, Katie, I'm going to give the Cowboys a B. There are some parts of this offseason that I liked, some parts I didn't like. I'm going to start with the hiring of Brian Schottenheimer because that is how their offseason started. It was, hey, look, we have this new coach. No one expected us to hire him. And this is the guy we're going to count on to lead us to the promised land. So now you fast forward, you mentioned the George Pickens trade. I thought that was a bold move that we really haven't seen from the Cowboys lately. So I liked that. Then you look even further and they said, hey, look, we're going to keep Kevontae Turpin. We're going to keep our punter, Brian Anger. So they did make some solid moves. But then Zach Martin retires, DeMarcus Lawrence gone, Brandon Cooks gone, as you mentioned. So there was definitely some to like about what the Cowboys did offseason. I didn't love everything, and that is how I ended up giving them a B.
I like this a little bit more than Breach did, and a big deal of that is because as a draft analyst, I loved their draft. It was one of my favorite in the entire NFL. I thought going Tyler Booker, Donovan Esaraku, Savone Revel, 1, 2, 3 was just three solid picks. And then the George Pickens move. I think it's gone very underrated just what kind of addition this is. Not only because George Pickens is a number one type of wide receiver. He was top 20 each of the past 2 seasons in yards per route run with just a cast of characters at the quarterback position, right? And in a run-heavy offense there in Pittsburgh. So this is a 1A, 1B situation a la what like Cincinnati has, what like Philadelphia has, that can really elevate your passing game to another level. And because it was their biggest need, wide receiver, everyone said after the draft, oh my gosh, they didn't pick a wide receiver. Well, they had this in mind and they added the best guy possible that any team added in the NFL at the receiver position this year. So because of that, I just liked it a little bit more. A- for me.
All right, I don't know if you guys watched the Netflix series on the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders, but I did, and I will grade the squad an A after watching that for them. Let's move on to the defending Super Bowl champions, the Eagles. They made plenty of changes. They parted ways with some key veterans like Brandon Graham, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, and Josh Sweat, but they locked up Saquon Barkley, probably the most expensive and best thing that they could do. They restocked with some veterans, signing Kenyon Green, Azeez Ojulari, and A.J. Dillon, while also drafting linebacker Jahad Campbell. But given the turnover and the fact that they face a really brutal schedule as well, 10 playoff opponents from last year, how are we going to grade Philly's offseason? Renner, I'll start with you.
It's tough because they were always going to lose a ton of talent. You look at that defensive line that they lost. Brandon Graham, Milton Williams, Josh Sweat. It's just going to be very difficult to replace all those guys. But I don't think they did too bad a job. Obviously, I loved re-signing Zach Bond after an all-pro season. He is a guy you had to get done. And I loved pairing Jahad Campbell next to him. This is reminiscent of, for Vic Fangio there, what he had in San Francisco with Navarro Bowman and Patrick Willis. I'm not putting him in that conversation just yet, but it's reminiscent of that. And then I think the addition that I really love is Kenyon Green. Trading for him, and yeah, I know it costs you C.J. Gardner-Johnson, but he's going to cost less. You have that glaring hole at right guard. Losing Kai Becton, that's really the only spot in this roster that has a need. He's a former first-rounder who just never really developed. The talent's always been there, but he's still young. Younger than some guys who went top 50 in this draft class, so there's potential he becomes that starter. So I went a B for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Renner, I'm going to have to agree with you. We're agreeing on something already. I can't believe this. I'm also going to go with the B. I like that you brought up Kenyon Green because, look, we saw what the Eagles did with Mekhi Becton, where it kind of looked like his career might be going into a tailspin. No, you put him in that Eagles offensive line. He developed. He looked really good, and I think the same thing could happen to Kenyon Green. Now, with the Eagles, when you win the Super Bowl, one of the problems is that everyone wants to steal your players, and that's exactly what happened this offseason. Josh Sweat, Milton Williams, just a bunch of key players on their defense, Darius Slay, are all gone. So you kind of have to reboot and start over, but the Eagles have been good at that. That's something that Howie Roseman has done well, as he has the talent in waiting to take over and fill the holes that are there. Now, are these guys going to be able to play at a Josh Sweat level or a Milton Williams level? We don't know yet. So I think the Eagles' biggest question marks are on defense, but they did take care of two of their own, Saquon Barkley, Lane Johnson, on offense. So I think we are going to see a high-flying Eagles offense that should be able to overcome any deficiencies the defense has early in the season. So I do like what the Eagles did this offseason. I'm giving them a B, just like Mr. Renner.
Okay, some solidarity there, given a straight B for the defending champions. The Commanders coming off really a remarkable turnaround, going from 4 wins in 2023 to 12 and an NFC championship berth in 2024, thanks in large part to Jaden Daniels and his dual threat brilliance this offseason. They heavily invested in their offensive line. They traded for Jeremy Tunsil. They drafted Josh Connerly Jr. They also added Deebo Samuel and Javon Kinlaw to bolster up really both sides of the ball. But again, with a tougher schedule on deck and some key defensive losses, I'll start with you, Breach. How would you grade Washington's efforts to really stay atop the NFC?
Katie, I actually like what they did. With Jaden Daniels on his rookie contract, it's like the Commanders said, you know what, we're going to swing for the fences. We're going to do everything we can to win a Super Bowl while he's on his rookie deal. We saw him pull off 2 big trades, the one for Deebo Samuel, the one for Laramie Tunsil. They added Javon Kinlaw. Heck, they're so desperate to win, they went out and got a kicker in Matt Gay, who was 28 of 28 from inside 50 yards. With Indianapolis last season. And then one of the things I liked is the players they kept. You look at Bobby Wagner. He's somebody who has a great understanding of Dan Quinn's defense. He's fit in really well. A little bit older, but I think he's such a key part of that defense that it was instrumental for them to bring him back. Zach Ertz, somebody who's been a good weapon for Jaden Daniels, and you always want to have that little security blanket for your quarterback, especially going to his second year. So I think this team, as good as it was last season when they reached the NFC title game, could be even better in 2025. I gave the Washington Commanders an A-.
I'm right there with you, Breach. It's jarring, the difference between the Dan Snyder era and the Adam Peters era now at GM, and the decision-making just good across the board, just long-term team building as well. I went with an A.
Okay, let's move on to the Giants here, really trying to shake off a franchise worst 14-loss season. They made some big moves to upgrade their roster. They drafted quarterback Jackson Dart in the first round after he led the SEC in passing yards. They signed Russell Wilson, added dynamic rookie running back Cam Scadaboo, finished 5th, by the way, in Heisman voting. They also heavily invested in their defense with number 3 overall pick Abdul Carter and signing safety Javon Holland. So I'll start with you, Mike, on this one. What grade would you give this really massive overhaul for New York?
This is one of my favorite off seasons. I went A+. I've been very critical of Joe Schoen over the course of his GM tenure, but I got to give credit where credit is due. He made great decisions this offseason. Didn't have to break the bank for any of those additions, and I love they threw the kitchen sink at the quarterback position, because we've seen in the NFL how fickle that position can be, and giving yourself 3 different options to win and give you quality quarterback play instead of the one Daniel Jones that we saw a year ago, I think is going to pay off big dividends. And then the headliner here, Abdul Carter. I think this is in contention for the best defensive line in football with the additions they made this offseason.
Yeah, absolutely agree with Renner. If the goal of the offseason is to get better, then the Giants aced it because they got better. Their secondary is better. The quarterback plays better. The pass rush is better with Abdul Carter. So they just got better all around. Now, are they going to compete in the NFC East? I'm not sure. But they're good enough that they could double their win total from last season, maybe get 6, 7, 8 wins. I didn't love it as much as Renner. I gave a B+, but I did really like what New York did this offseason.
All right, big thanks to John and Mike for bringing the red pens and the hot takes. Always a pleasure grading Ross.